And hello, everyone. I'm Bill Tucker in for Steve Malzberg. Welcome to America Talks. Well, it's here. It's finally here. Election Day. If you don't know that and you haven't voted, leave and go vote after we're done talking here. We have a special show planned today. The number for you to call is 877 Newsmax. 877-639-7629. We want you to weigh in, so please jump in on the phones, get in, and let's play. We're going to welcome in our first political panel of the day now. And joining me is Betsy McCaughey. She is the former Lieutenant Governor of New York State. Pete Hoekstra, former Republican Congressman from the great state of Michigan. He's also the former chairman of the House Intelligence Committee and author of Architects of Disaster, The Destruction of Libya. And I'm joined from Florida by my colleague, Ed Berliner, host on Newsmax TV. Can Trump win the swing states with his ground game? That's where we're going to start talking here today as election gets underway. Folks, I don't know what any of this means, but when I voted this morning, my polling place was much more crowded than it is in any typical election, and people were pouring in. I actually spent about 15, 20 minutes waiting to vote this morning, as opposed to my usual, I don't know, 60 seconds or so. Welcome, glad you could all be here. And let's start with Congressman Hoekstra. In your experience as a politician, does it matter, or can you read anything from the size of the turnout?
Oh, you really can, especially as you take a look at different parts of the state. Here in Michigan, we're hearing that turnout in the Detroit area, absentee ballots and those types of things are way down. That's a Democratic stronghold. Here on the west side of the state, it looks like the numbers are up. We've got people coming out. This is a Republican stronghold. And so I think things look very, very positive in a swing state like Michigan, which we may win, and I think we will win for the first time since 1988.
Very interesting. Ed, you're down in Florida. You're looking at the data. Are you seeing anything that gives you, at this really early stages of the voting, anything that gives you any inclination about whether Trump can triumph in these swing states he really badly needs?
I think it's still really early, Bill, because we're still not getting a lot of the data. We're just starting to hear a lot of what is going on here on the ground. I will say this much. Your idea about ground game, if Donald Trump had a ground game, he'd be far ahead, I believe, in many of these states already. I'll bet you that Pete and Betsy would agree with that as well. Because quite frankly, he has not had a traditional ground game. He has not listened to what the experts and the analysts basically tell us works, certainly not from the RNC. And there has been a lack of a ground game. Then again, he really hasn't needed a ground game, because if you look at it, he has done everything from the pulpit. He has done everything at his press conferences. He has generated enough interest there. He won the nomination there. So I think he felt, why should we need a ground game? Maybe he's right.
Betsy, what do you think? What do you think about Ed's idea?
Time will tell, but the fact is what Donald Trump has argued from the beginning is that his followers are so energized, so committed, you don't need paid professionals to organize a ground game with busing, etc. He believes that his followers will come out on their own, just the way they filled the arenas without having to hire Jay-Z or Beyonce or Lady Gaga to bring in the crowds.
Yeah, that is an interesting point. Betsy raises a fascinating point that I have been actually in conversations with my colleagues up here about this morning, is size of crowds. Last night in Philly, we saw a really large crowd for Hillary as she wrapped up, but there was Bon Jovi was there, Bruce Springsteen was there. She's had Lady Gaga out on the trail with her. She's had Madonna out on the trail with her. She could have stayed home
and that crowd would have been there.
Do you think
might have been bigger?
You think?
Yeah. Especially since they had to listen to the president's really long speech.
Hang on, Ed. Go ahead, Betsy. Finish your thought.
I said, I was responding to the comment the crowd might have even been bigger had Hillary Clinton not shown up. And I said, especially because, you know, Barack Obama is very long-winded at the end of his 8 years. He likes to talk a lot about himself, and he went on a long time last night.
Go ahead, Ed.
There is something that we have to consider also from those people who go to all those rallies. And Betsy's right, the Trump rallies have been incredibly attended. However, for several of the rallies here in Florida, I've spoken to people who have been to the rallies. And I was quite shocked, as a matter of fact, to hear from some of them, and this was rallies in Central Florida and other areas of the state. They said, we didn't go to see Donald Trump, we went to see the show. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, we went to see the oddity that is Donald Trump. I said, are you voting Trump? They said, we don't know. We just wanted to go to the show. We wanted to be a part of it. And we really have to wonder how many people decided they just wanted to go because it is a show and it's a free show. And people have an inquisitive idea of who and what Donald Trump is. And I believe there's a lot of people here in Florida, ones I've spoken to, who didn't go for any political reason. They wanted to see the act.
Well, but Congressman,
Well, they can see that too.
but hang on,
Yeah.
I actually want to check in with Congressman Hoekstra because he's had to go through this re-election process several times.
Well, I emceed 2 events for Mr. Trump in the last 2 days. On Sunday night, we were over in southeast Michigan. We had 10,000 people show up, people standing in line for hours. They had a political reason for being there. Last night at 1 o'clock in the morning, we had 13,000 people in Grand Rapids. My voice is still hoarse. And the line was still a mile long for people who wanted to get in. And these are people that would not have shown up in your traditional get out the vote effort. These are people who do not identify as Republicans. These are Democrats. These are independents. These are union workers. I think the regular Republican vote's going to come out. The interesting thing here will be how many non-traditional Republicans who are willing to stand in line for 2 to 3 hours to see Donald Trump, then wait for 3 hours before he's even on stage, are going to go out and vote and stand in line for 15 minutes. I think they're going to show up in big droves.
Well, it's interesting, and I want to stay with you for a second.
I think that's the key, Pete. What you just said is the key. How many of these people, and they are amazing crowds, how many of them will translate to votes?
Well, and my question back at the Congressman is simply this. Is there a substitute for crowd size and passion versus ground game, or do you really need both of those? You're an experienced political veteran. You've had to get reelected. I mean, don't you need a ground game, or is passion and grassroots sort of enough?
I will take passion any day over ground game. Passion says, I'm going because I'm positively motivated. And this time, they may be negatively motivated. There's a lot of people who are angry at the elites and they want change. I will take passion because on election day, if you've got to try to persuade somebody to get out and vote, it's going to be much harder. Give me passion.
Betsy, let's talk about voter fraud. The specter of voter fraud has been raised. A lot of people, reasonable people, have responded. There might be a vote here or there that is an example of voter fraud that we can't deny. But voter fraud on a massive scale, the kind needed in order to affect the outcome of an election, is virtually impossible. Do you think voter fraud is going to be an issue?
I disagree. Voter fraud is an issue. The Pew Foundation found that 1 out of every 8 voter registrations is flawed. It's either a dead person, a duplicate, or someone who's not legally entitled to vote. That's a serious problem. And the fact that the Democratic Party repeatedly defends flawed voter rolls, there is no positive argument for leaving the voter rolls flawed. It allows voter fraud. And that is compounded by early voting, much of which is by mail. It is much easier to vote fraudulently by mail than in person.
Ed, we've talked about this for a while on Newsmax, and I know you've been a part of many of these conversations. In your opinion, in your experience as well, do you think that voter fraud is a serious issue like Betsy suggests?
I don't believe it's a serious issue where it can change tens of millions of votes. I think that's really the issue here. Is there fraud? Are there ways out there?
You don't need to
there's one issue here. Excuse me, Betsy, hang on a sec. People have been claiming, for a matter of fact, that George Soros is backing a company that is bringing voting machines into America for the election. That's not true. There's no connection between him and the company, which is United Kingdom based, and none of their machines are being used here in America for these elections. Yet people are talking about that's voter fraud. It hasn't been proven. I think what you're talking about, Betsy, is there's no doubt that we need a change in America when it comes to voter registration and people voting and making absolutely sure that the right person is voting and the individual themselves are voting. But to think that millions of votes can be changed in one election, I think that's a stretch.
You don't need millions, Ed. Al Franken won by 312 votes. You can win a state by a small number of votes and really change the outcome of the Electoral College. Of course, I'm not suggesting that there's going to be something illegitimate about this outcome, but there is no excuse for flawed voter rolls. And in addition, we now have the problem in Virginia where Governor McAuliffe has just granted mass pardons to some 60,000 felons and then facilitated their immediate voter registration. That wasn't the deal that the Virginia legislature agreed to. We were supposed to consider these felons individually, and somebody ought to be looking into that, because 60,000 votes is enough to change the outcome in Virginia.
Yeah, but I think, I just have to be, I have to be a little skeptical here for a second. I just have to be skeptical. Let me just say this. I have to be skeptical about this, what Betsy just suggested, because if you give 60,000 people the right to vote, whether you like it or not, or whether you think the process was legit, yeah, I don't know how you guarantee those 60,000 people vote the way you want them to vote. I mean, I understand they may feel like they might be obligated to you, but it may have been a Democratic prosecutor that put them in jail to begin with. Go ahead, Pete. Go ahead, Ed.
Well,
I'm not sure if Al Capone quite been raised from the dead just yet, but I think it's close.
Go ahead, Pete, go ahead. We got about a minute and a half.
I think, with profiling and those voter profiling and those types of things, it's amazing what you now can do and profile and determine if, with a certain set of people, how they are going to vote. It is being, the consumer profiling, the political profiling is a very intense and very developed capability right now.
Well, this is certainly going to be interesting. We have about a minute and a half left. I'm going to throw this around for a quick answer and survey the crowd. The Democrats are starting to temper their expectations for Congress. There clearly is no way they're going to win the House, never was. The Senate now they are backing off from. It seems that the Republicans might retain control of the Senate. Quick couple of word answers from each of you. I'm going to start with you, Pete.
52 Republicans in the Senate when we get to January 3, 2017.
Betsy?
I would agree with that, and one of the key races to watch tonight is in New Hampshire, Kelly.
Yeah, it's very interesting to me. I have never understood why she didn't appeal well in that state. Having a husband who is a former military guy and a small business guy, she seems like the kind of candidate that would just serve really well and be well liked in New Hampshire. Betsy, Pete, Ed, thank you all very much for joining us. It's going to be a fascinating day. Newsmax is going to be here all day long to keep talking about it, reviewing it, and seeing what we can see. Up next, our second political panel. That's Wayne Allen Root, my friend Ellis Hennigan, and Jack Berkman. Don't go anywhere, and don't forget to give us a call, 877 Newsmax. We'd like you to be a part of this program, and we'd love to hear from you. Don't hesitate. Pick up the phone and give us a call. Be right back.